students. You are welcome to class. Today is lesson 2 of LIS 109 and we are treating typical African traditional settings. We are going to be learning some of the things that the typical African people do, their educational system, their indigenous knowledge, and their way of life generally. My name is Dr. Ajie Ifama Abigail. I'm your facilitator for the day. I'll see you in class. Like I said earlier on, the topic for today is typical African traditional settings. At the end of this class, you should have learned what a typical African setting is. You should be able to explain the characteristics of the African traditional setting. Should be able to explain African indigenous knowledge and its characteristics, as well as African traditional educational system and its characteristics. I have a class activity for you. What do you understand by the term African setting? Another distinct feature of the traditional African setting is traditional political authority. The kings display absolute power during the pre-colonial era in Africa. They are in charge of information and the dissemination of it. They delegate an authority to go and disperse the information. For instance, in the southwest of Nigeria, messages could originate from the Oba or Bale, while in the southeast, messages could originate from the chiefs, council of elders, and so on. So there is always an authority who delegates, who disperses information in the traditional political authority setting. Social political organizations are also part of the traditional African setting, such as the Age Grade, Market Association, Hunters Association, Umuada Association, and so on. All these African traditional settings have one thing or the other to do with culture, and culture has some distinct characteristics for us to identify that, okay, family, marriage, social political groups, all these African traditions have one thing in common to do with culture. Culture is universal in the sense that every society has their own, which is very true. Culture is transmitted from one generation to another. From what we have seen and heard, that is also true. It is learned through the process of socialization. Culture is conveyed in behavior. It involves perception and values. It is shared among the same people. All these have something to do with the African traditional setting. The African traditional setting also has to do with the African indigenous knowledge. That is the knowledge that resides within the African people. Indigenous knowledge refers to the understandings, the skills, and philosophies developed by societies with long histories of interaction with their natural surroundings. As you can see, the, will I say, person in the picture has all these herbs has all these drinks which are locally made to cure one disease or the other and to keep them healthy. Having known what an African indigenous knowledge is, there are some characteristics to it. It is oral and passed on from one generation to another. It is practical in nature. It is acquired through socialization process. Um, it is an experiential knowledge based on a worldview and a culture that is basically relational. There is no formal documentation of facts. One has to be there physically to witness it. It is embedded in tradition, in culture, and worldview of the people. Another thing that is very important in an African traditional setting is the African traditional education system. Um, During the pre colonial African educational system, it was different from what we have today. Then there were no formal blocks of schools where teachers and students meet to interact. Everything was informal in nature. In African traditional educational system, no effort was spared by parents, grandparents, elder siblings, even neighbors. Everybody was involved in educating children around them. They were instilling things in them, values like honesty, respect, obedience, generosity, amongst others. Unfortunately, the introduction of missionaries and colonialists of Western education disrupted the typical African traditional education system and way of life, but it is trying to be balanced now. The African educational system has some distinct characteristics, which are it is rooted in culture and tradition of people, it is intended to foster learning, it is concerned with the environment, it is built on the people's value, it is based on oral tradition, it is acquired through the process of socialization. In this lesson, we have learnt about the African traditional setting, family, marriages, and so on. We learnt about the African indigenous knowledge. We learnt about the African educational system. We have learnt a whole lot in this lesson. If you have any further questions, kindly send an email to iajie@noun.edu.ng and I promise I will respond.